This might be the only city in Oregon named by a woman. And after her husband passed, she did the unexpected near what might be the 10 most famous waterfalls in the country. There are over 10,000 cities on Earth. I'm David, and I'm headed to every single one to find out why they exist, how they got their name, what you have to see, and the unique restaurant you have to find to grab a bite to eat. Today we're in Silverton, Oregon, finding out how one woman turned tragedy into an entire town, why a dog walked 2,500 miles to get home here, and what it's like to walk behind a waterfall and eating at a restaurant that survived 3 fires. This is The Wild Escape, and I welcome you to Silverton, Oregon. Silverton, Oregon is a small town, so small in fact that you could probably walk through the entire town in 20 minutes and think nothing of it. But this place has been collecting stories for over 170 years, and most of Silverton's history is painted on these walls around me. So let's go back to the beginning and find out why this town exists. Why does this town exist? Well, people lived in this valley for over 6,000 years. The Kalapuya and the Molalla people were here long before settlers arrived. Every year, the natives burned part of the land on purpose to make the soil fertile. It kept the ground open and helped the camas root grow, which was a major food source for them. This yearly burning also kept the valley clear of heavy brush and forest, which meant that when the settlers arrived in the 1840s, they found wide open, easy land with fertile soil for them to farm. In 1846, 2 settlers named James Smith and John Barger built a sawmill 2 miles up the creek from here, where downtown Silverton sits today. They called their settlement Milford. Yes, Milford. Their town had a store and a few other buildings, but there was one major issue that they ran into. Milford sat 2 miles from the main road, and in Oregon's wet, rainy winters, 2 miles was a long way to go on a bad, washed-out road. But we'll get back to that part of the story here in a minute. In 1850, a school teacher named Polly Coon headed west to teach in the Willamette Valley. A year later, he claimed a piece of land a couple miles downstream from Milford, where Silverton stands today. He had left his wife Polly Coon and their daughter back home in Wisconsin for a couple of years. In 1852, his wife and daughter joined her parents and siblings in a wagon train to head west and reunite with Thomas. Sadly, not long after they arrived in Oregon, Thomas had gotten sick and passed away in January of 1854. Just 2 months later, Polly gave birth to their son. She was without her husband, but not without family, as they all had settled nearby in the same county. Along with her son, Thomas also left Polly with his land claim, which included 160 acres. Polly, being the smart woman she was, decided to build a town on it. She laid out streets, sold lots, and built what Silverton is today. She's the whole reason this town exists. Now let's get back to Milford. Remember that town with the washed-out road? Well, the settlers there decided to leave and move down and join her in Silverton, leading Milford to be abandoned forever. And the town grew fast after that. Sadly, in 1855, a treaty was signed moving the Kalapuya and the Molalla people off this land to the Grand Ronde Reservation, where their descendants still are today. By 1855, Silverton was officially a city, and in 1894, it had grown to almost 900 people. The town was considered one of the most forward-thinking towns in Western Oregon. Timber ran their local economy for decades, and the Silver Falls Timber Company was once one of the largest sawmills of its kind in the entire world. So now that we know the history on why this town exists, let's figure out where the name came from. So how did Silverton get its name? Well, first, let's point out that this might be the only city in Oregon that I could find in the records that a woman got to name. There was a large white oak tree near the creek the town was built on that was a landmark everyone in the area knew. Settlers called it the Old Oak, and it was an old meeting ground for the natives. When it came time to lay out the new town, Polly had built the street around that exact tree, keeping it in the middle of everything. But we'll get back to that in a second, because the man we mentioned earlier in the story, John Barger, was one of the original settlers. So some of the residents thought it would be fitting to name the town Bargerville, after John. But as you can guess, they didn't win that one because Polly ended up naming it after the creek, running right past the old oak tree, Silver Creek. And in 1854, Silverton was born. The following year, Polly had remarried and became Polly Coon Price. Her previous husband never got to see his land claim become the town Polly made it to be, and it's still here on the map over 170 years later. So now that I'm here 170 years later, what is there to do here? For such a small town, this area alone brings in over 1 million visitors a year, most traveling to see the Trail of 10, which is 10 waterfalls on a single hike. But this town has amazing murals and history that we want to bring to light. So on our itinerary today, we have 3 locations to visit. But our first is Silver Falls State Park. This is Oregon's largest state park, and it's the reason Silverton itself is the gateway to Silver Falls. Silver Falls is also called the Trail of 10 because it's a loop trail that passes 10 different waterfalls, and on 4 of them, the trail actually allows you to travel behind them, experiencing waterfalls in a way most never get to. You walk into these amazing basalt caves, and a wall of water is falling right in front of you, the mist showering your skin and cooling you down on a hot summer's day. The tallest waterfall here is Double Falls at 178 feet, but South Falls is the most famous, and it's the first one most people reach depending on which way you start the trail. The full loop is over 7 miles, and if that's too much, there are shorter routes that still get you to the best waterfalls, including one that's about a mile if you just take it to see South Falls and turn around. One of the men we have to thank is June Drake, who spent 20 years campaigning for this place to become a state park. There's a small waterfall named after him on the trail. It's not the biggest one out here, but there's a plaque next to it that's worth reading. As with any hiking trail, even though you're surrounded by water, it is best to bring water to stay hydrated. Now, I did get pretty wet in certain spots, so depending on the time of year, bringing a change of clothes would be wise. So now that we've finished filming here, our next stop is on our way back to town. The Gallon House Covered Bridge. About 1.5 miles outside of town is the last covered bridge left in Marion County, and is one of the oldest bridges in the entire state. It was built in 1916 for about $1,300, which in today's cost is about $38,000. It is 84 feet long, spanning across the creek. I'm just as excited to see it standing here more than 100 years later. In 1916, Oregon became a dry state, which meant that there was no selling alcohol anywhere. Silverton followed that rule strictly, but just a few miles away in Mount Angel, things were a little bit looser. People there got around the law by technically giving each other the alcohol instead of selling it, which kept it legal on paper. A little shack near this bridge started selling whiskey by the gallon to anyone from Silverton willing to make the trip, and the locals called it the Gallon House. The bridge became the route everybody took to get here, and the name just stuck to it permanently after the Prohibition ended in 1933. It's a 1-lane bridge still open to traffic today, and driving through it is worth the short detour on its own. Now let's head to our last stop that is in the middle of town before we end our day with a meal. Our last stop today is right here on Main Street, and it's a story that I opened this episode with. In 1923, a family named the Braziers took their dog on a road trip from Silverton, Oregon to Wolcott, Indiana. That's about 2,500 miles. During a stop, their dog Bobbie got chased off by some loose dogs at a gas station and disappeared. They searched for days, but they never found him. Heartbroken, they drove home without him. 6 months later, on a February afternoon in 1924, one of the Braziers' daughters walked out of the family restaurant onto Main Street and saw a dog coming down the sidewalk. Skinny, matted, and his toenails worn down to almost nothing, stood their dog, Bobbie. He had walked home 2,500 miles through winter on his own, all the way back to Silverton. The Oregon Humane Society was skeptical at first, so they investigated, and they found people all along the route who remembered feeding and sheltering a dog that matched his description. So the story was true. Bobbie became a national celebrity. He appeared in Ripley's Believe It or Not, he starred in the silent film Playing Himself, and when he died in 1927, the mayor of Portland gave his eulogy, and Rin Tin Tin, an actual Hollywood dog star, showed up to lay a wreath at his grave. Today there's a life-size statue of Bobbie right here on Main Street. Down the block, a 70-foot mural tells his entire story on the side of a building. That mural is just 1/30. Silverton has more murals than almost any town its size in Oregon, covering local history and wildlife across nearly every block of downtown. While I was here, I was lucky enough to run into the artist who actually paints the murals around town. Her name's Lori.
Coming to Silverton got me interested in history, and that's what got me started with murals. Then I think it was 1994 when I started planning the first one about the old oak tree. Mural is about Bobbie the Wonder Dog, and I painted it 25 years ago. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm actually repainting it. So I've taken the paint down to the basics and primered it and transferred it back on the wall again. So this segment here has been repainted, and now I'm getting ready to do the same thing over on this side. I think this will take me 2 summers at least, but it took me quite a while to paint it the first time around. So I've got this also involves staging it, stripping everything off, so it might take quite a while actually. I painted, I think, 6 of the murals here in town. Bobbie the Wonder Dog is probably my favorite in many ways, but also the Davenport Arabian Quest is another one that I really like.
Spend the rest of your day admiring the wonderful artwork and working up an appetite before we end our day at the restaurant you have to find. Alright, the restaurant you gotta find. Mac's Place. This building is the oldest wooden framed commercial building in Silverton, and it's been standing here since before 1890. It's had a few different lives. It started out as a hardware store and then a general store, before a carpenter named Lewis Case Russell bought it and turned it into a furniture and upholstery shop. For a while, his wife also ran a hat-making business out of part of the building as well. Since the 1920s, the building has seen many things, but now it's a restaurant. Silverton lost a lot of its original wooden buildings in the fires of 1885, 1900, and 1934, but this one made it through all 3 fires, and it's now called Mac's Place. There's chef's choice dishes that change daily, homemade soup is made every morning, and fresh bread is baked from scratch. There's also house-smoked meats. The menu is sure to please after a long day of the stops that we've had. Silverton is an amazing little town with lots of history, and it's the first town I've visited on this show that tells a story through its murals on its walls. The first town with 10 waterfalls, and the first city I've filmed where a woman had built and named the city. This is why I do this show, because the world is full of places that have history on every corner and plenty of stories to tell. There are over 10,000 cities in the world, and I'm glad I got to explore this one. Subscribe to find out where I end up next, and travel with me next time on The Wild Escape.